Hey, it's Jason Hartman. Thanks for joining me as we are getting through the 10 Commandments of successful investing. You know, this has been very well received core content of mine for the past 14 years. And I've really tried to help outline, mostly from my own mistakes, some of the things that investors can do to be really good at investing. Now, this isn't everything. There's obviously more to know. But if you grasp these 10 Commandments, you're going to be pretty safe. It's unlikely you'll make a big mistake. You may not achieve every success by knowing them, but at least you'll prevent the downside risk in making mistakes. Today I'd like to talk about commandment number 8. Commandment number 8 is thou shalt use borrowed money. Thou shalt borrow to accelerate wealth creation and reduce risk. Now, a lot of times this one is a little counterintuitive, okay? See, there are millions of people who are playing by old rules. If we listen to our parents or our grandparents, a lot of times they told us to be very conservative, right? And their idea of what was conservative in their day, they were right, okay? They just had different rules than we have today. It all changed in 1971. What happened in 1971? You probably know what I'm going to say, don't you? In 1971, we went off the gold standard when Richard Nixon finally closed the gold window, as they say, and the dollar was no longer tied to gold. And what this meant is there was no real restraint on government anymore in terms of their spending, and thereby no real restraint on inflation. Now, we'll talk about inflation and monetary policy and things like that have a giant effect on all of our lives in future videos on the channel, so make sure you subscribe. The problem with these old rules of pay off your debts and save for a rainy day is that those old rules, those pre-1971 rules, they made sense back then. They were great rules back then. But when we got into this inflationary environment, where you saw this massive inflation in the 70s, and hey, I get it, that we're almost at 2020 now, okay? We'll fast forward. Don't worry. Stay tuned here. So when we saw these old rules, saving was a good deal and debt was bad. But nowadays, debt can actually be a very positive thing. In fact, I like to say in a sort of snarky fashion that debt is my favorite four-letter word, right? So debt is my favorite four-letter word. And we can use debt prudently, and we can be smart with debt, okay? And we can accelerate wealth creation. Now, most real estate investors understand the value of leverage, right? That's sort of the basic understanding. That's the elementary school understanding, and it's certainly powerful, no question about it. So for example, just for round numbers, easy numbers, if you put 10% down on a property and that property is $100,000 or $1 million, add a zero, take away a zero, doesn't matter, right? Let's just go with $100,000. And if that property appreciates by 6%, right, and you put 10,000 into it, your gross return on investment, 10,000 in, 6,000 in return, only 1 year's gone by, is basically 60%. Pretty good. If you pay cash for the property, on the other hand, and you put $100,000 down, remember, this is the way it is in the stock market. You have to put 100% down on a mutual fund or gold or silver or precious metals, cryptocurrencies, 100% down. Income property is the most debt-favored asset class in America, and the debt can be very, very powerful. So if you put 100% down or $100,000 and the property goes up by 6%, you only made a 6% return on investment, right? Now, these are simplistic. They don't include positive or negative cash flow. They don't include tax benefits. And income property is the most tax-favored asset class in America. We will talk about that in a future video. So you do this, and then your return is lower. But wait, there's more, as they say, right? There's more. What else is there? Well, there's the risk factor, right? You might think, and it's counterintuitive, you might think that by putting a lot of money down, you are reducing your risk. But oddly and counterintuitively, the opposite is true. The opposite is true. Why? We've seen this happen. I've seen it twice in my career. In the early 1990s, or the early to mid 1990s, I saw all sorts of people doing short sales and getting workouts and loan modifications. People that were highly leveraged, they had lots of debt on their property, and they were the ones getting a break. Yet the people who did the quote-unquote right thing and put a lot of money down or paid their mortgage down over the years, they weren't getting any breaks. And then during the Great Recession of 2008, give or take, right, about 10 years ago from now, we saw all the people with the highest debt levels, the most, you could argue the most irresponsible people got all the breaks. They got all the loan modifications. They got all the short sales. They got all the workouts. Or, like millions of people, they just walked away and gave the property back to the bank. Look, that's what the contract says. You can either pay the mortgage or give us back the collateral for the mortgage. That's the deal you make with a bank, right? So many people said, look, I don't want to pay the mortgage. I'll just give you the collateral. So they did that. Millions of people did this, right? The point is, life isn't fair, so grow up, okay? It's not fair. My mom used to say that all the time when I was growing up. I would complain about this unfairness or that unfairness. She said, Jason, life isn't fair. And she's right, it's certainly not fair. So look, you want to use leverage, you want to borrow, because you can accelerate your wealth creation and you can reduce your risk at the same time. The highest risk is to have a lot of equity in the property. The best insurance policy, as I always say, is a high loan balance. So use leverage. Use it prudently. Of course, it has to be treated with some respect, no question about it, but use it. Leverage is a very powerful tool. Now, there's one other giant benefit in the wealth acceleration thing. Well, let me go back to that other point about the best insurance being a high loan balance. Think of all the natural disasters that have happened over the years. Hurricane Katrina, Florence, the wildfires in California, any natural disaster of any sort, right? When those things happen, guess who gets all the breaks? Yeah, you guessed it right. The people with highly encumbered properties. In fact, you might remember years ago reading about Hurricane Katrina when it hit the Gulf Coast, and all of the states, I think it was 6 states, that literally put a moratorium on mortgage payments because of the disaster, saying that people did not have to pay their mortgage because of this natural disaster. Okay, fine, but what about the people that didn't have a mortgage? Did they get a payment from someone? No, they didn't. Did they get a benefit from somebody? No, they didn't. And the people that had high mortgages, they could just walk away. Or if their insurance company didn't want to pay the claims on their policies, guess what? Their lender became an advocate for them and said, look, you might rip off John Doe, but you're not going to rip off Bank of America. You're going to pay the claim because you got to protect our collateral, right? So that lender can actually become your advocate and go to bat for you to collect from your own insurance company, right? So that's a big part of it. But the thing we didn't talk about today on the positive side, those are the negatives. Well, they could be positive depending on where you are, right? But the positive side we also did not talk about when it comes to wealth acceleration is my trademark term, and it's a mouthful. You ready? Remember this because we'll talk about it in a future video. Inflation-induced debt destruction. Say it that 10 times fast. Inflation-induced debt destruction. I know it's a mouthful. But what that means is that your mortgage and your mortgage payment actually is paid off. Not by you, not by your tenant. It's paid off by inflation. We'll talk about that on a future video. What do you think? Leave your comment below or visit jasonhartman.com/ask for more. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our videos. Happy investing.